Welcome to Heaping Spoonful, a twice-monthly conversation with restaurateurs, chefs, growers, and others who have helped generate the legends associated with eateries across the Mid-South. The team at Benny Keith is proud to sponsor this adventure with the goal of preserving the stories that have helped cultivate an amazing food scene across the Mid-South. So kick back and enjoy a Heaping Spoonful.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Heaping Spoonful. Our goal with this podcast is to share the stories of the Mid-South's top chefs and restaurateurs with our listeners. I'm Kelly Bass, and I'm proud to be your host. Covering the restaurant scene is something I've done more on than off, actually, for almost 40 years. Most of that was doing restaurant reviews for Little Rock newspapers and magazines, and I did those, particularly the newspaper ones, long before the internet was a thing, back long before anybody who got on Yelp or TripAdvisor could tell you how things are. In those days, there were two of us that wrote for newspapers, and we were the only voices in town. But now, thanks to the folks at Benny Keith Foods Mid-South Division, I am a podcaster, and I'll tell you, I like talking about food more than writing about food. Today, I'm very happy to welcome Jack Sundell, the owner and operator of The Root and Mockingbird Bar and Tacos, two really cool restaurants in the South Main district of Little Rock, Arkansas. So welcome, Jack.
Thanks a lot, Kelly. Glad to be here. Thanks for flying me down to Cancun.
Hey, no problem, man. Was that Ted Cruz sitting in front of us on the plane?
I think I did see him on the plane.
I know, me too. He goes to all the cool places. So I'll tell you, the stories our guests tell on Heaping Spoonful rarely progress in chronological order, but in your case, I think that makes the most sense because, these days the restaurant business is full, as it should be, of owners-operators who have come to understand the value of locally and regionally sourced ingredients and their appeal to customers and would-be customers. They are restaurateurs who along the way became foodies. You, however, are a foodie who later became a restaurateur. And by foodie, I don't mean somebody who just loves food. I'm that kind of foodie. I mean someone who came to understand the value and the contributions of a local food economy long before you ever set up shop. So tell us about that process, which I believe started or at least was nurtured when you were in the Peace Corps.
That's right. Yeah. I have been interested in food for a long time. I think initially I got interested in good food through organic food when I was living in Michigan. I was shopping at this little food co-op and just, I couldn't believe how good the farm fresh milk was or the organic citrus. It was like I was tasting an orange for the first time. I then joined the Peace Corps after college. That was after living in Michigan, and joined the Peace Corps and went to Morocco. And while I was in Morocco, I kind of got interested in local food systems. That was a place where this concept of food sovereignty, controlling your food sources was really a big deal. A family there in the city that I was living in, which was in the Atlas Mountains in central Morocco, if they had a flock of chickens or a cow in their yard, it could really make the difference for them between eating okay and really eating well. That also is a place where I kind of got interested in the community of food, I guess. Almost all of their special events, holidays, different things like that revolved around food and being with loved ones around the table. Ramadan, obviously, huge Muslim holiday. Lasts a month, and it involves fasting, during the daytime. But, what's often overlooked is the huge food celebration at the end of the day. It's all about, breaking bread with people you love. And then also in Morocco, they have a tradition of eating couscous at their noon meal on Fridays. And so that was another time, a weekly gathering. It was just incredible, and I always looked forward to it.
That is cool. How long were you in Morocco?
27 months altogether.
Wow.
So it's a 3-month training. You learn some language, and then they send you off to do whatever your project is. So,
wow. So two more years. Yeah. So
2 more years.
Yeah. That's significant for sure.
It was. And another part of it really is the cafe culture there in Morocco. And that's a place where, I had this interest in local foods and in the, food bringing people together, but also, that's where I kind of learned to appreciate cafes as this, social gathering place.
Sure.
Unfortunately, it's very male-dominated there, But as a male volunteer, that's where I spent a lot of my time. And so get together with friends, talk about sports, talk about politics, drink coffee, watch TV. I mean, so many of the kind of the fun and even important times, things that were happening in Morocco for me were happening in the cafe. And, I kind of thought about that when I got back, like where is the equivalent of that in the United States? Yeah,
that's a good point. And so I know that the story that I've read, you ended up coming and working at Heifer International, their farm there in Perryville. Did you learn about Heifer when you were in Morocco, or what led you to make that move?
I was already aware of Heifer. Being from Arkansas, it's well known that it's headquartered here. I was just looking for something to do when I got back. I was interested in animal husbandry at the time. I was thinking, I had a lot of different thoughts about where I might end up, but that seemed both like a good, segue into whatever would be next. And I was kind of thinking about vet school potentially, but I still had this idea about opening a cafe kicking around in my mind that had kind of started in while I was in the Peace Corps. But, it was out at the Heifer Ranch in Perryville, which is, I think it's changed since, but used to have a lot of volunteers living there, and it was sort of an education facility. But it was also a working organic farm. I was involved in the livestock program there. So, I was raising animals that we were eating in the cafeteria. And then, for dinner, we'd all do cooking and potlucks. And, man, you've never been to a potluck if you haven't been to a Heifer Ranch potluck.
I bet.
Yeah.
Well, you and I are very familiar with Heifer, but just give a nutshell explanation of Heifer to our listeners who may not know about it.
Well, I think their official mission is ending hunger and poverty and while caring for the earth. One thing that I remember them saying a lot was not a cup, but a cow. So their whole thing kind of revolves around, you're not just taking food to people in need, but you're actually bringing them an animal that they raise, and use in some way for production. They're milking the cow, but then it's a bred heifer that has a baby, and then that calf is passed on. So they have this idea of passing on the gift, and in that way, by giving one gift that continues to give down the down the stream, it can really alleviate hunger and poverty in a real way in a lot of developing countries.
Sure, and it dovetails with what you learned in Morocco, where you said, a family that has a cow has got a sustainable way to live, as opposed to those who don't. So it sounds like the perfect match. And I didn't realize that you were from Arkansas. I thought maybe you came to Arkansas to work for Heifer because you talked about being in Michigan and those kind of things. But you are an Arkansan?
I am. I grew up in Monticello, and I went to Hendrix College.
Yes, Conway, Arkansas.
Conway, Arkansas. So I've been here a long time, and and actually Hendrix has a connection with Heifer. I think they do a lot of programs, during their freshman orientation, where people go out to Heifer and do the Global Village. And honestly, coming back from the Peace Corps is probably harder than going to the Peace Corps. The culture shock of going somewhere like that, it's all new and interesting, and it's very exciting. You're learning a new language, but getting back was really a lot tougher, resettling in your own environment where you've been gone for a couple of years. And so in that way, Heifer was this kind of perfect cultural halfway house where I could,
way to put it,
take American culture in at my own pace.
Exactly. And you're out on the ranch, and you're raising animals, and they've got an organic farm. And so you're still kind of based in the same sorts of things you were doing in Morocco, and then gradually assimilating back into this crazy, U.S. culture. And I remember being in an Arkansas Times event. It may have been one of the restaurant award events. I don't remember. We were at Christ Church at the 6th and Scott in downtown Little Rock. And I remember walking into this little room, and they had a kind of a buffet set up, and I had banh mi, and it was really good. And I'm like, who's doing the food? And they said, well, these guys that they cater some. They don't have a restaurant. They're kind of thinking about doing a restaurant. And it was you and your group of folks. And so, again, talk about that period of your time, because you said, you got back from the cool cafe culture of Morocco, and you're at Heifer, and you're thinking about maybe doing that someday. But this was like a period of, I guess, ramping up towards that, learning how to, you knew how to cook, but learning how to cook for people.
Right. So that was actually a 3-year startup phase that we did as the Root Cafe. When I moved into Little Rock from the Heifer Ranch, pretty shortly after that, I started working on the idea of the Root Cafe with a friend who'd been out at the ranch with me. Shortly after arriving in Little Rock, I met Corey, who's now my wife, and she became part of the team. And for the next 3 years, basically, we were just brainstorming, trying to build this idea of the Root Cafe and the business of the Root Cafe. So, during this startup phase, we were doing fundraisers, the kind of thing that you went to with the Arkansas Times. We actually had a lease with Christ Episcopal Church there. Scott Walters was the head of Christ Church at the time. Incredible guy. And he let us lease the kitchen. I think we paid him $50 a month or something like that. And he'd let us cater out of there. He'd actually let us do events. So that Arkansas Times thing you went to was a Root Cafe event. And we did like dinner and a movie. We did dinner and a speaker. And, so I think we did that one with Alan Leverett and Lindsay Miller.
That's right. That's what it was. Yeah. I remember where I sat and what they talked about. Yeah.
Right. So and then it was a chance for us to kind of, broadcast what we were doing. And, by doing things like that, we were able to raise a little bit of money during that. But also at the same time, we were building our network of local farms that we'd work with. And then, we were also just, kind of trying to raise this idea of local foods, kind of get that out there. We'd set up at, Earth Day or, Hillcrest Harvest Fest, and we'd tell people about the Root Cafe, local foods cafe, but at the time,
we didn't have a restaurant.
Right. Yeah. And actually we were at this for so long, people started to ask us, well, are y'all a virtual cafe? Like, what's the deal here? And, so it really did, I think in a lot of ways we were just new and nervous about going into a major amount of debt to open a restaurant. We were not in the restaurant business. I mean, I had worked at a lot of restaurants before that, but we realized that we would really be jumping into a whole new thing, starting a business. So a lot of it was trying to raise that capital on the front end. So we did fundraisers. We taught canning and food preservation workshops, and those turned out to be incredibly popular. At first we thought we'd have to drum up interest in them, but turned out that once we started offering the classes, there was much more interest than we could meet in demand. So we did those for several years. And then we also did something called the Share Campaign, which was where it's kind of like a Kickstarter campaign, but before there was Kickstarter. And we told people that for every $10 they would donate, that we would pay them back with a meal once we opened. And so with using all of those different things, we were actually able to eventually open for, I think we borrowed less than $10,000 to get the door open.
That's amazing. Well, you also had a lot of patience. I mean, 3 years in the process, in the making it takes some discipline to stick with that and be patient and not try to jump the gun. So that's cool. So then at one point, almost about 10 years ago, the Root happened. And so how did you finally make that leap from virtual cafe to bricks and mortar?
Well, we were looking for a space for a lot of the time that we were in that startup phase, and we were actually initially going to be in the old 7th Street Tattoo building, if you know the place right next to Vino's, across Chester from Vino's. And so we were thinking of going in there for about a year, and eventually we became aware of some problems with the building, and 7th Street was taking a long time to move down to its new home, which is just a block east of there. But a friend told us about, and actually it was two different friends at about the same time, so it was one of those occurrences where you think like, oh, this is kind of meant to be. But they told us that Anita Davis was building out this building that used to be Sweden Cream, and that she was looking for a restaurant tenant. She had heard of us and was interested in meeting us. We had probably looked at 20 different potential sites by that point. And even 2 years before that, we'd looked at the space that eventually became the Green Corner store.
Yeah.
And we were not that adventurous at the time. We saw saw the neighborhood, and we were just like, oh, we don't know if we're ready to be this far south of the interstate, 2 years later, it's kind of a testament to how quickly all that happened. We went and looked at the Root Cafe's home now, and we saw it and we were like, this is the place. Like we'd been looking everywhere trying to find the right neighborhood, the right building. And we pulled up to that parking lot and we were like, we can just totally see ourselves here. This is the spot.
And it has a parking lot, which Arkansans and Americans in general require sometimes.
They do.
Yeah, and Anita Davis, again, for those in Arkansas may know about her, but she's the patron saint of that SOMA District with Bernice Garden, which is diagonal from you guys. I got a block down, and all that she's helped make happen there, including the Essie Purse Museum. One of the 2 purse museums in the world. The other one's in Amsterdam. We went there. They were closed for remodeling the day we went there. So I was going to be maybe the only guy who's been to 2 purse museums.
Well,
anyway.
Did you tell them in Amsterdam you got your own purse museum?
Exactly. Who needs you?
Right.
So again, you mentioned Sweden cream, and old timers like me remember that dairy bar. In fact, when I was my first real job was working at the Arkansas Gazette as a copy boy, and I ran errands. And so every Sunday afternoon, I'd run down and get root beer floats and bring them back to the copy editors and the reporters for a little afternoon sustenance. Did you know anything about Sweden cream? I'm sure you've heard about it since you've become the Root.
Absolutely. Yeah. In the restaurant business, a lot of people talk about a cursed location, where like you've seen 5 different restaurants go in there over 5 years and no one can make it work. And I think Sweden cream and now the Root, like I consider that kind of the opposite, like a blessed location or something.
Exactly.
It's got all this great history and, people fondly remember coming there as a child. And so I think we've, very fortunately get to benefit a little bit from all those positive associations that people have built over time.
And obviously I've got that for sure. Because it had I just love a dairy bar burger, and it had one of the classics, like a lot of places do that we know about. So one thing that when the Root opened was it was small. So what was your original seating capacity?
Around 20 people.
Around 20.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then another thing the Root was when it opened and has continued to be is popular. So small plus popular equals crowded. So I guess you realize that maybe we got the demand for more than 20 seats, and you picked a really interesting way to expand the footprint of your restaurant. Talk about how that came to be and what it is.
Well, right. So the original building is about 900 square feet, and we opened there. We did have the patio from the beginning, and the courtyard, so that gave us a little bit more seating. But in terms of indoor seating, it was about actually probably closer to 15 people. And there's this weird, I don't know if you're aware of this, but with restaurants, this weird rule that if you only have one bathroom, your max seating capacity is 15 people.
Oh, I did not know that.
You add a second bathroom, for some reason your max seating capacity goes up to 75. So I don't know what they think is going on in that second bathroom.
That's some weird math.
I know. So anyway, so that was the restriction really from the beginning, that we only had one bathroom. And so we opened at a really great time. It was 2011. There was this growing awareness of local foods. There was a lot of talk, like Food Network and, this explosion of farmers markets in Arkansas. So I feel like it was just really good timing for us. And we, just continued to stay busy through those first years. And we were having a lot of fun, learning a lot. Originally, we only did lunch.
All right.
And then shortly after, we added breakfast. But pretty early on, we found that people were asking for dinner. They said, we really want more casual dinner places in downtown. And that sort of led us to seek out this Mission Main Street grant. And it, obviously seemed like a real long shot, but Chase Bank was doing this thing where they were offering $150,000 grants for, no strings attached, for businesses to expand what they were doing in some way. So we met all the requirements. I put in an application, and lo and behold, like 2 months later, I'd completely forgotten about it. This random person calls from Chase Bank, and they were just like, "Hey, you got one of those awards." I mean, I couldn't believe it, Yeah. And we were one of 20 businesses that year that was selected out of 25,000 that applied. Wow. So it just blew us away,
Yeah, I mean, $150,000 for a restaurant operation is a big deal, and so that's when you use that money to expand your footprint. And talk about what you decided to do and what you ended up doing.
Well, we felt like expanding with shipping containers would be something that would be quirky, also kind of fit our aesthetic of reused and recycled, and so we ended up using 8 shipping containers. 3 of them became a new dining room that you can see from Main Street there. 3 additional ones create a prep kitchen in the back, and then we have one that's an office, and then one that we turned into a walk-in cooler. So before that, it was our kitchen was probably smaller than most people's home kitchens, honestly, and we'd sometimes have 3 people standing shoulder to shoulder at a 4-foot table prepping.
Right.
And really the issue was that we didn't have space to be, prepping food for an additional shift, So we were there getting ready for breakfast, serving breakfast, getting ready for lunch, serving lunch. We'd be there till 8 p.m. just doing all of that prep. So there wasn't really a way for us to add dinner without adding that additional space.
Sure.
So
what do you see now? I mean, not counting indoor seating, not counting the patio.
Well, indoor we're about 40 to 45, and and then including outdoors, we've got the patio and then the courtyard area. We're about 110 people when we're open everywhere and the weather's nice.
Yeah, that's cool.
And then 2 years ago, a year and a half ago, in fall of 2019. We did a patio expansion as well. So we actually added a double door on the Main Street side of the building, and we pushed the patio out toward Main Street. So it gave us an additional 20 seats.
Yeah. Well, that's cool. Well, I will say, even pre-COVID-19 for sure, but, you stay packed. And I do kind of hate to report that on multiple occasions we've said, hey, let's go to Sunday brunch at the Root. And we drive up and there's a line out the door. And so we end up giving our business to Raduno or South on Main or somewhere. But I guess that's just, Yogi Berra, one of his classic malaprops is no one goes there anymore. It's too crowded. And I'm sure there's points in time that you're not packed, but you have a good crowd and a very loyal following. So is that just a fact of life you've gotten used to, is we're going to have a good crowd and we're going to do the very best we can to take care of everybody?
Well, that's definitely the way we think about it. But I will tell you, having a line out the door is pretty easy. You just put the register really close to the door so that only about 2 people can fit inside.
Okay.
And it looks like there must be something awesome going on there. So,
yeah.
But it's one thing about it is we've always stayed busier than we expected to be from the very beginning, and we've also made ourselves busier in some ways by adding breakfast, adding brunch, adding dinner. But, part of that is just that we are trying to catch up to demand. And I think there's this really big demand for local foods. And,
Sure.
At this moment, the Root is, and Mockingbird are among the only places in Little Rock that are really filling that niche for local food served in a restaurant environment. So if you, for example, read a book about all the ills of industrial agriculture and industrial meat production, and you think, Jesus, I don't want to eat a pig that was raised on a feedlot in a confined operation. Where can I go and get a pork chop, or where can I go and get a barbecue sandwich that's made with a locally raised pig? You just don't have that many options in Little Rock.
That's true. Or anywhere else. True. I'm sure. Okay. Well, listen. We're going to take a short break here on Heaping Spoonful and be back in just a minute with Jack Sundell of the Root and Mockingbird Bar and Tacos in Little Rock, Arkansas.
I hope you're enjoying this episode of Heaping Spoonful. We at Benny Keith Foods enjoy talking about the food scene almost as much as we enjoy providing the top quality ingredients that help restaurateurs and chefs across the Mid-South create their magic. Now let's dive even deeper into the culinary world with your host, Kelly Bass.
Welcome back to Heaping Spoonful. Our guest today is Jack Sundell of the Root and Mockingbird Bar and Tacos in Little Rock, Arkansas. And so after years of operating the Root, you expanded your footprint, and working with partners, you opened Dos Rocas. I guess means 2 rocks. Just a couple of blocks north, also on the same side of Main Street, also in SOMA. What led to that project? How did that come to be?
Hubris, maybe, temporary insanity. I really, it was the desire to grow and create new opportunities for some of our key employees. There's this kind of this challenge that you face as a business owner eventually, where when you have really awesome employees, you want them to stick around. And if you want them to stick around, you have to continue to challenge them in new ways. And so I think often, people think that business is growing is driven by, the ambition of the business owner. But in our case, we're just always trying to seek new opportunities for these awesome employees that we have. And so that was one situation where, we saw this great space. Mockingbird is in what used to be the Juanita's party room. Right. And so it's got this beautiful exposed brick wall, and there was already this bar there. And, we walked in to look at it, and, we weren't really thinking that much about doing something right away. But when we saw that space, we thought, this is really has a ton of potential. And, we thought about some of the staff that we had at the time at the Root, and, how they might get involved with a new project, something Latin American in terms of the culinary background. And so we felt like that would be a great new thing to offer to the culinary landscape in SOMA.
Sure. And it was, again, very popular from the get-go, for sure. And then things changed, and you took over. I guess you and your wife took over as sole operator and renamed the restaurant Mockingbird Bar and Tacos. And let me just say, if there's three things that I love in this world, they're mockingbirds, which, as you well know, is the state bird of Arkansas. I love bars. I hang out at them all the time. And I love tacos. So you've hit the trifecta for me. So what's the difference in what Dos Rocas was doing and what Mockingbird's doing?
So Dos Rocas, when we opened, one of the partners was from Paraguay. And the culinary focus was really Latin American street food. And giving him an opportunity to kind of play with some of the stuff that he had eaten growing up, but also kind of make it include Mexico, Central America, South America. So, but we really wanted it to be about authentic street food. And when he and his wife left the business, which is less than a year into the operation, we didn't feel right, my wife and I, as business owners, to continue to operate a restaurant with a Spanish language name with a focus on Latin American street food, because it's not really our heritage, but also there's this very real concept of cultural appropriation that is something that's, I think, more people are aware of now, where that's not really our food to make and sell.
Sure.
So we felt like to make it something that's authentic to us, we needed to give it a different name, and really focus the menu instead of on Latin American street food. Keep the focus on Latin American flavors, but bring our attention to local sourcing to bear on the menu. So we ended up with Mockingbird Bar and Tacos, which the Mockingbird, state bird of Arkansas, but also kind of makes its living reinterpreting the songs of other birds, and so. Mm-hmm. We felt like that was a fair way to kind of, put into a neat package this idea of taking the Latin American flavors and giving them an Arkansas spin. So it's something that we call farm to taco instead of farm to table.
I like it, yeah.
And it's something that people like you said, they love tacos, they love margaritas. We try to offer all of that in a very casual ambiance, but, with the same focus on scratch cooking, local sourcing, just like with the Root, all of the meat that we serve there comes from Arkansas farms. We make our own corn tortillas before every shift.
That's great.
So, we're grinding our own pork in-house for chorizo. Everything that we're doing there, we're really trying to focus on, great sourcing, great quality ingredients, seasonal things. So we do a lot of specialty tacos when eggplant's in season or when butternut squash is in season. We're just trying to keep it fun and keep it interesting.
Yeah, well, the relationships you've built with the Root, with all these local growers and farmers, you can just take them down the street a couple blocks and, same folks are giving you the same great stuff. And I'm sure they're appreciating the two restaurant approach as opposed to one. So I do hope our listeners who don't live in Little Rock can come our way, get a chance to visit the SOMA District of Little Rock at some point, because it's really a cool collection of shops, bars, and restaurants, and seems like there's a good sense of community and camaraderie among the business owners and operators there. Can you talk a little bit about that? I mean, you've come to know all the folks who are in business around you, and do you feel like that's kind of a nice cooperative community of folks?
Absolutely. It's a neighborhood. It's a neighborhood. It's also a community. And we mentioned Anita Davis earlier. She deserves a lot of credit for early on being able to see the potential for, obviously things have been going on in SOMA for decades. I mean, Community Bakery's been around
Joe Fox,
forever.
Yeah.
And Midtown Billiards has been there for ages and ages. So there are a lot of, things that have been going on in South Main. But, I think Anita was really the person who kind of had that vision for this next generation of business in SOMA and said, this could be a lot more than just a few businesses hanging on this, stretch of Main Street, that we can really make this a neighborhood that has its own brand and its own identity, that people, come to Little Rock and they want to visit SOMA. So she deserves a ton of credit for that. Also, Joe Fox, you mentioned with Community Bakery, but for decades now, he's been the person behind the Business Improvement District.
Yeah.
They've done all of the kind of streetscape improvements that, Anita, redid a lot of buildings, but the fact that you go down there and all the sidewalks are fixed and the landscaping's nice and the light poles are historic in nature, like that's all been that sort of, blood, sweat, and tears of Joe Fox making that happen. So, he deserves a ton of credit. Shelley Green at the Green Corner Store. She, 2 years before the route opened, she was down there. And, so she was really a pioneer among business owners, one of the first to really put her flag there at that intersection. And then we've, over the decade that the route's been open, we've seen a ton of new businesses moving in. I mean, so many restaurants now, it's incredible. But you can really come to SOMA. The great thing about that is that you can come to SOMA. That can be your destination. And then from there, you can kind of pick what you want to do. You can, you've got Raduno, you've got South on Main, you've got Rocktown Distillery. I mean, how big a deal was that when they moved in?
Yeah.
So I actually organized the Business and Merchants Alliance down there. And, we've just seen it grow and grow over the 3 years that I've been organizing the meetings.
Yeah. And then you got all the cool places like Moxie, and you got South Main Creative, and so the folks who love cool stuff to go buy, or retail is booming down there too. So the River Market area of downtown Little Rock, which was kind of our first little party area, and now things have stretched down, thankfully, Main Street, had gotten designated as an entertainment district before the pandemic, which means basically at certain times in certain areas, visitors can consume drinks purchased from a bar or restaurant, not bring your own six-pack, and be out in the street or on the sidewalk having a beer and going from place to place, which was really cool. And then that entertainment district status was granted to SOMA, I believe, in early July of 2020. We were, again, didn't know where we were in the pandemic grand scheme of things, but it was going. So talk about how that came to be, and then just kind of how the whole experience went, because it became a great tent village there on the parking lot at 13th and Main Streets across from South on Main.
Exactly. Right. So, during the pandemic, obviously, like you said, there was a lot of uncertainty at the beginning about how long this was going to last. But once at Mockingbird, we reopened for curbside, we immediately started to feel the effect of not being able to really sell alcohol.
Sure.
At the root, less than 10% of our sales come from alcohol. At Mockingbird, by contrast, it's about a third of our sales.
Right.
So it in a way, a lot of that was born out of the need to create a space where we could safely seat people and let them get beers, margaritas, wine, all that kind of thing. The first, we started with the SOMA Outdoor Dining Room, which was the physical setup that you mentioned, the tents that were in the parking lot. And the idea with that was that, even when restaurants were allowed to reopen at 1/3 or even 2/3 capacity, a lot of times they weren't limited by the number of people that they could have inside. They were limited by the number of tables that they could safely space,
Sure.
So they might be allowed to have 50 people in there, but based on how far apart the tables had to be, they could only get 25, and that wasn't going to expand. So we felt like if we created this big seating area that we could encourage a lot of people to realize that they could get takeout from their favorite restaurant and then just take it across the street, sit in the SOMA outdoor dining room. And from that, we immediately started working on that entertainment district. The city board was, they were really, really accommodating and allowed us to get that set up pretty quickly and renewed it all the way through the end of 2020. So, we did that for 6 months, 7 months. And then we started adding programming. We had music on Friday nights. We had live trivia outside on Saturday nights. And, those were great ways to do safe and socially distanced events during the pandemic, outside where everything was completely open air. And that went on until just before Thanksgiving.
Right. And now we're recording this in late February of 2021. And are there hopes to crank it back up when the weather gets good again?
Definitely. So we did that project in partnership with Gabe Holstrom from the Downtown Little Rock Partnership. And I just met with him yesterday, and we're talking about trying to get the outdoor dining room up and running by April 1st. So that's our goal. Last year, actually, I applied for a grant through Main Street America and the Hartford Insurance Group. They offered a grant called the Heartbeat of Main Street. And so we were really fortunate to be selected as one of those recipients. We got about $15,000 to put toward the SOMA outdoor dining room. And so we're going to be able to do a lot of upgrades this year, some nicer tents. We're going to be able to add several other features, and it'll help support programming and staffing through the early part of the warm season.
And so now that we have entertainment district status, people can come to Mockingbird and get a margarita and take it back out to the outdoor dining room.
Absolutely.
Yeah, which again makes a big difference. Well, we've talked about it, and as I've been saying for almost a year now in recording our episodes of Heaping Spoonful, I really look forward to the day when I don't feel compelled to ask our guests about the pandemic, but we're not there quite yet. So again, is Mockingbird, what did you have to do in terms of shutting down? What have you done as far as curbside? Are you reopened at both places with in-house dining? What's kind of the trajectory of all that for your two spots?
Well, we're definitely in the minority in that we have not reopened for indoor dining at either place. I personally don't feel comfortable doing that, and I don't feel comfortable asking our staff to take care of people in an indoor setting who aren't wearing masks. And, if we were running a retail shop, I'd probably feel a lot differently about it. Sure. Because you can have people inside and they really don't have any excuse to take off a mask. But, at a restaurant, there's no way they can be in there without taking off their mask. So we've, at the Root, we have the good fortune there of having the patio, the courtyard. So it allows us to have 12 tables there, and we're doing a lot of takeout, which also easier because we have a parking lot.
Right.
But we have added groceries, so that's one thing we pivoted to really early on, and that's been a huge help, for us, but also for our farmers. When the pandemic hit, suddenly we were closed unexpectedly for, like at Mockingbird, we were closed for about 5 weeks, and at the Root, we closed indoor dining and weren't sure where things were going to go. But our farmers, they plan months, sometimes years in advance for what they're going to be supplying us. So by pivoting to groceries, we were able to help them kind of keep moving that supply that they already had. We've also, at the Root, we've streamlined our hours. We used to be, like no dinner Tuesday, and we were brunch only on Sunday and closed at 2, and, all these kind of things that were honestly hard for our employees to even keep up with, much less customers. Now we've just gone to 8 a.m. to 8 p.m. Tuesday through Sunday. We do breakfast till 11 every day. We do lunch all the way till we close at 8 p.m. So that's just one menu, and then we add some dinner things at night. That's, I think, been a lot easier for us, but especially during the pandemic when everything is about streamlined communication, letting people know what you've got going on. And then we've also used the time to really focus on building community and building capacity internally, with our team. It's been a really difficult time and a challenging time, but I feel like we have a stronger team now at the Root than we've ever had, which is a really great thing to be able to say when we're looking at reopening and ramping back up,
Sure.
When dining comes back around. And then at Mockingbird, we haven't reopened for dine-in yet, but we've had the SOMA outdoor dining room, the entertainment district, and then we're actually switching there over to counter service, and we intend to continue that instead of table service. I think it just is going to fit our vibe a little bit better.
Yeah.
We're a casual taco place, and I think counter service is going to be a little bit better fit for what we do.
That's good. Well, teams do pull together in tough times, and this has been a tough time. And so I'm glad you've been able to keep folks going. And I've pulled up and bought groceries from the route myself. So I appreciate you doing that.
Yeah. And actually I failed to mention our crew at Mockingbird, but we've had the same sort of success there with, really finding those stars, and giving them a lot of authority to manage on the ground throughout the pandemic. And it's like you said, during difficult times, people really step up, and you find out, who's ready to face a challenge. And so our crew down there has definitely done that.
That's great. That's great. Well, before we close today, I want to revisit a subject you and I have discussed before, in which I've written about before, and that's how Guy Fieri of Diners, Drive-Ins, and Dives fame found his way to the route. So talk about that process, getting the phone call, what you had to do when he showed up, what shooting the segment was like, and what it's meant for your business.
Well, I should just say before we start this conversation that Guy Fieri made me an honorary city council member of Flavortown.
Oh, that's good to know.
I don't usually lead with that, but I often find a way to bring it up in conversation.
Impressive.
No, it was, I guess it was, 2018, sometime during the summer, we got an email and it said, Diners, Drive-Ins, and Dives is finally coming to Arkansas. It was one of 2 states at the time that they'd never been to. And they were looking for 6 restaurants to hit while they were here. We were one of the ones they were considering. They'd had us recommended by a lot of their viewers. And, in the back of my mind, I'd always kind of thought, I wonder if they're going to get in touch with us someday. We kind of fit their very quirky vibe, unique feel. Lo and behold, they emailed and they said, fill out this stuff. We're kind of trying to pick our 6 restaurants out of the ones we've gotten in touch with. So, we were one of the ones that was selected. Their process is incredibly rigorous. And I don't know if people know, it's a very fast-paced show. The work they do behind the scenes is so organized, calculated. I mean, they really...
And thorough.
I mean, it's, they wanted every single step of 8 different recipes, and they wanted the ones that involved the most scratch cooking, which for us is almost all of them, but for something like the bratwurst, which they eventually did, we make the mayo in-house, we make the brat in-house, we make the sauerkraut in-house, so they wanted to see and read about every step in every one of those processes. So, it was a lot of back and forth with them, them deciding what they wanted to feature on the show, once they had picked us. And then it turns out that Guy Fieri doesn't like eggs. So most of our breakfast stuff was out from the beginning. And the pimento cheeseburger, oddly at that time, that was one of the things they selected. But at the time, we weren't doing that as a regular dish. It was just a special that we did occasionally. And, I think once the show aired, we knew that it had to become a thing because people were going to come and they were going to say, where's that pimento cheeseburger? So, but that one as well, we make the pimento cheese in-house. We get a whole cow at a time from Simon Farms in Conway. And so we're grinding that in-house and, hand pattying each of those burgers. We use 14-day sweet pickles that we make in-house on that burger. So, there's just a lot of process involved. Their team came in. I think we had to close 3 different days during that. And Guy Fieri was only actually there for about 2 hours of it. So we would, they would film everything ahead of time. We would make the brats. We'd have all these little, 20 different little things with spices and ingredients set up on this stainless steel table. And, they would take photos of it, and we would do it on Wednesday, say, and we'd go through the whole process, and they're shooting, they're shooting these close-up shots of everything you're doing. And then on Friday, when Guy Fieri gets there, they're like, okay, we have to make that, they show us a picture of what it looked like on Wednesday, and they're like, we have to make it look like this, and it has to be the same container for every single spice, and the same container for the milk, and the same, every single thing. We had to be wearing the same clothes, of course.
Exactly right.
And then Guy Fieri's there, and during that time, all they're doing is getting the shot of Guy Fieri standing there with the person who's cooking. And so, they'll be like, Guy Fieri will be like, all right, Jack, so today we're going to make the Old World bratwurst. And I'll be like, yeah, so we're about to do this. And they're like, all right, that's enough. And we've got all this stuff that we've splayed out here. And they're like, all right, now get the sauerkraut. And so then we do the same thing. He's like, all right, now show us how you make the sauerkraut. All right, that's enough. And so but it was so interesting to see behind the scenes how they make that happen because, they were here for a total of 2 weeks maybe.
Yeah.
Filmed the 6 restaurants. Guy Fieri came in for 2 days, hit all the spots. And, their production crew was so professional, so thorough, like you said. They just knew exactly what they needed to do, what they wanted. And
the classic well-oiled machine. They know what they're doing.
Yeah.
So he's there. They do it. A few months later, it debuts. And all of a sudden, there you are on the Food Network. And what happens?
Well, the Saturday after it aired on a Friday night, it was our busiest day ever at the Root. And not by a ton, but enough that we were pretty sure that it was because of that. And we continued to be very busy for a long time after that. We were a place that had already been busy before that, so we might not have seen as much of a surge as some places. But, it has, the kind of incredible thing about it is how it's continued to have an effect. Just last night, I talked to this great couple from Michigan. They'd been down in Arizona visiting, his brother, I think. Driving back, they saw the episode, which just aired, I think, on Sunday around Valentine's.
Oh, wow.
And they were like, all right, we can drive through Little Rock. We'll stop there on our way. And, so there they were. They had the pimento cheeseburger. They wanted to know about the Old World bratwurst and taste the sauerkraut.
Sure.
This is 3 years now almost after it aired originally, but I think it's aired maybe 26 times since it originally did. So, every time it airs, it's, I don't know how many thousands of people seeing it and thinking, if I ever make it to Little Rock, I'm going to stop at that place.
Well, that's part of being, the benefit of being at the confluence of I-30 and I-40. A whole lot of people pass through, and they're hungry.
They do. One funny anecdote actually is when Dos Roques originally opened, we had 2 TVs on the wall, and we've since taken them down. But there were a couple times when Diners, Drive-Ins, and Dives, our episode was airing during service. And so there was one time, it's around 7 p.m., our show is on, and there was this group of guys that were there, and they were probably having their 3rd round of margaritas. And, the guy sees me walking around, and then he's kind of watching the TV, and I notice him, looking up and looking at me. And finally, he'd had a few, but he stopped me, and he was like, man, that's you on the TV. And I was like, yeah, that is. That's our Diners, Drive-Ins, and Dives episode. So,
pop 2 blocks down the street and you can have that stuff too.
That's right. So it's a real point of pride,
Yeah, well,
I love that we did it. And
well, it's a real deal for sure, Well, listen, I thank you, Jack, so much for being our guest today on Heaping Spoonful. Best of luck in all you've got going in the SOMA District. Thank you for your leadership with the merchants group down there. And by the time this airs in April, we'll be back up and running at the SOMA downtown.
The outdoor dining room.
Outdoor dining room. Sorry, I couldn't get the words out perfectly. Thanks to everybody listening today. We appreciate you listening as always. Remember, we post new episodes the 1st and 3rd Tuesdays of each month. So please go check out some of the ones you may have missed and keep an ear and an eye out for the new ones. So goodbye, everybody.
We hope you enjoyed this episode of Heaping Spoonful. On behalf of all of us at Benny Keith Foods, Mid-South Division, please know how much we love connecting you with the legends of the culinary scene and their unique stories. I look forward to the next time we can offer you another Heaping Spoonful.